When did it get so expensive to live? I am 21, just graduated college, and I'm ready to go out into the world, have my own place, start my own life, But unfortunately, and fortunately, it is a blessing, but I live in New York City. It's great. There's everything to do. You are in a privileged position if you get to live in New York City. However, it happens to be one of the most expensive places to live in the world. So, coming off fresh out of college, it is difficult to really start your life. I was one of those kids right after college that wanted to live on their own as soon as possible. I personally, I just felt ready, right? And I believe as right after college, if you go that route, you should be able to find a job and be able to at least have your own apartment. Unfortunately, everything is so damn expensive. I took the first job I could right out of college because the job market for me, my experience, atrocious. I applied for so many jobs in the span of an entire, like maybe 2 semesters, my final year, and I got one offer and I took it. And it wasn't even anything crazy. It's just a regular job, regular desk job, nothing fancy, but I was happy. And off of that salary, I assumed I'd be able to at least find a lower cost apartment in a decent neighborhood. And, it'd be tight, but I kind of just assumed I'd be able to. Now, monetarily speaking, I would have the money in my account to pay for it. However, getting approved for an apartment is the worst experience ever in New York City because there are these dumb rules that aren't laws, but for some reason, every landlord in existence wants to follow it. You need to make 40 times the rent. You need to make 40 times your monthly rent. For example, if your rent is $1,000 per month, your salary needs to be $40,000 a year. Easy math right there. And in that example, that might be easier to comprehend and that rule might not be as restrictive. But when rent in New York averages $3,000 and the average wage is maybe in the 70s, maybe it's probably lower to be honest. I am not looking any of this up. I'm just trying to yap to a camera right now. But when those are the averages, it's insanely hard to qualify for your own apartment. You either need to have years of experience already, or you need to live with roommates, which work for some people and sometimes it doesn't work for others. I've seen both. Or you can go down the guarantor route. Me, I went down the guarantor route. But another thing, when you have a guarantor in New York City, and I'm sure this applies to other large cities like maybe Chicago or Los Angeles, but a guarantor needs to make 80 times the rent, which is absurd. So for a $2,000 apartment, which in New York City is no more than one bedroom, most times it is a studio. So when you are paying $2,000 for most likely what is the size of a studio apartment, and you don't qualify for getting the place on your own with your own income, your guarantor needs to be making $160,000 a year. Some people know someone who will be able to be a guarantor for them that way, others don't. So then you have to go down another layer of just hoops to go through just to live somewhere. If you want to live by yourself, you have to go through a guarantor company, which granted is a good solution because many New Yorkers can't qualify for their own apartment and it's absurd. And even looking back, comparing rent prices between COVID and now, it's only been 3 years or four, and rents have gone up hundreds of dollars since 2020, March of 2020 and 2021, because people were moving out of New York, etc. Rent was a lot lower. And it's just very another thing about just New York being so expensive, the food, the food prices since COVID as well skyrocketed. I swear, groceries for a week are 100 something dollars. In my experience, maybe I'm shopping at the wrong stores. I go to Stop and Shop, but during college, when I was able to grocery shop and have my own kitchen, I went to Trader Joe's. And from I've heard people say Trader Joe's is expensive, but in my experience, it was cheaper than the alternative options. Granted, the alternative options in my area at the time was Whole Foods and whatever local grocery stores in whatever high income area I was in. And it wasn't high income because I had high income. It was high income because my dorm was there. And even simple things like I track inflation by the price of chicken and rice. You know, the halal carts on the street, I that's how I track. That's my inflation index, right? People look at the stock market, people look at reports. I look at chicken over rice. And back in high school, between 2016 and 2020, I personally, from the carts in my area, was able to get a platter, extra sauces or whatever with a drink for $5 to $6, depending on who you went to. Now, in the area I work at, it is $9 to $10 with no drink and no extras. It's crazy. I went to the halal cart a couple days ago. I asked for chicken over rice and no pita bread, just a little extra white sauce and barbecue, and that's it, right? I gave him a 10. I got no change back. I said, huh? No change is crazy. It really hurt my soul. I can't tell you how much that hurt me, but regardless, I already ordered my food and I was hungry. I was really craving that chicken over rice, so I got it anyway. But that just goes to show you, like, even little things like food from a cart the prices have skyrocketed, almost doubled. Is And this leads me to one of my gripes with how others expect people to live. We all have heard of the financial gurus on YouTube. They tell you live on a certain budget if you can. And honestly, I do agree with a lot of the finance YouTubers. I love Caleb Martin. I agree with some things Dave Ramsey says. Some things I feel like are outdated, but overall, I feel like good he always has a good intention of your best financial intention. Who else? There's a couple people I'm forgetting, but you could learn good things from certain YouTubers. However, when it comes to living expenses, I feel like certain people don't understand how expensive it is to live in these certain cities. And of course, the rebuttal could be, just move to a different state. But that, of course, moving takes a lot of money too. That's thousands of dollars. Some people just don't have that. But let's say someone is making $50,000 a year, right? And I believe I saw this budget where it was 50% goes to living expenses. Now, $50,000, in my opinion, should be enough to sustain yourself fully. You're not going to have a glamorous life, but you should be stable and you should have your own place. However, living in New York and probably Los Angeles and Chicago, that those aren't my markets, of course, but if you make 50,000, which is under 3,000 after taxes each month, but we're just gonna say 3,000 for simplicity, right? The average New York rent is already close to 3,000, but from my research, you can find your own apartment in decent and safe neighborhoods for 1,800. Honestly, anything under 1,800, you're either living in probably an illegal basement apartment, or there's just you don't want to live in that spot. Like, it's probably infested, these type of things. So, or it's just absurdly small. But let's say 1,800 is our base mark for a one person living situation on their own. That's already more than 50% of your income. You're basically going to have nothing left over. You can't save for retirement. You can't save in general. You can't build for the future. So I feel like a lot of these budgets don't have high expense cities in mind. So another rebuttal to this is, well, you have to live with roommates. And yeah, if that will lower your expenses, then you should do that. However, in my opinion, you shouldn't have to live with roommates on a respectable salary, such as $50,000. $50,000 should be enough to, in theory, just sustain yourself with your own living space. But it just doesn't work like that over here. And even then, with $50,000 and you have a roommate situation, you're still paying $1,000 in rent most likely in decent neighborhoods. And I emphasize decent neighborhoods because no one should have to live in a dangerous neighborhood because they can't afford it, right? I'd rather max out my budget than save a couple dollars and live somewhere where I don't feel safe. You everyone has the right to live in a safe environment. Living and just having fun. When you're spending all your money on your expenses, like where do you live life, especially when you're young? I You should be having fun, experiencing new things, traveling. These are all things you should do before, you leave this earth. And it's it's sad that some people might not be able to live the life that they want even within moderation just because they don't get paid enough. They had a bad start to life and they fell behind income wise. And honestly, when I watch a lot of people critique other people's spending, like going on vacations when they can't afford it and whatnot, I do agree with the sentiment that it's irresponsible. But the more that I grow up in this city and try to live on my own, I kind of understand it. I understand that you work so hard just to make barely enough money to live on your own, or you're living with roommates and you still barely make any money. You are going to want to not miss out on certain things. Sometimes you just want to live, and it can be pretty hard in high income cities.